Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I've got some absolutely wild stories from the entitled parents subreddit that honestly made me question whether these people actually exist in the real world. Because let me tell you, the audacity some parents have is just beyond my own level of thinking. But before we dive in, comment below where in the world you're watching from, and be sure to leave a like on the video. I read Reddit drama like this every single night. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new. Anyway, grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and let's explore some parenting disasters. I'm Sarah, and my 8-year-old daughter Emma has been taking piano lessons for about 3 years now. She's gotten pretty good, and was really excited to perform at her first big recital at the community centre. I had spent weeks helping Emma practice her piece, and we were both nervous but excited for the big day. The recital was organised so that each student would perform on the same beautiful grand piano that the music school had rented specifically for the event. It was a really nice Steinway, much better than our upright piano at home. Emma performed beautifully, and I was so proud of her. After her piece, we went to sit in the audience to watch the other students perform. That's when I noticed this woman sitting behind us, getting increasingly agitated during each performance. Her daughter, who looked to be about 10 years old, had performed earlier in the program and had done quite well. After the recital ended, there was a small reception in the lobby where parents and students could mingle and congratulate each other. Emma was chatting with some of her friends when this woman approached me. She introduced herself as Linda and said her daughter Katie had been taking lessons for 5 years. Linda seemed friendly at first, complimenting Emma's performance and asking how long she'd been playing. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. She told me that Katie was extremely talented and had been accepted into a prestigious summer music program. She said Katie needed to practice on a quality instrument to prepare for the program. I congratulated her and said that sounded like an amazing opportunity for Katie. That's when Linda dropped the bombshell. She said that since Katie was more advanced than Emma and had this important program coming up, we should let Katie use our piano for practice sessions. I was confused and told her that we just had an upright piano at home, nothing special. Linda said she knew that, but that any piano would be better than what they had access to. She explained that they lived in an apartment and couldn't have a piano, so Katie had been practicing on a keyboard. I felt bad for Katie's situation, but I explained that our piano was in our living room and Emma practiced on it every day after school. Linda said that Katie could practice in the evenings after Emma was done, or on weekends when Emma didn't need it. I told her that sounded like it might be inconvenient for everyone involved, and suggested she look into practice rooms at the music school or library. Linda got defensive and said those rooms had to be reserved weeks in advance and weren't always available when Katie needed them. Then Linda said something that really surprised me. She told me that since Katie was more talented and had been playing longer, she deserved access to a real piano more than Emma did. She said that Emma was just a beginner and wouldn't notice the difference between practicing on a keyboard versus a piano. I was taken aback and told her that Emma definitely could tell the difference and that our piano was important for her development as well. Linda said that I was being selfish and not thinking about what was best for the more advanced student. She then suggested that we could work out a schedule where Katie would come to our house 3 times a week for 2-hour practice sessions. She said it would be good for Emma to hear how more advanced pieces sounded, and that Katie could even give Emma some tips. I declined and explained that having someone come to our house that frequently wasn't something I was comfortable with. Linda got visibly frustrated and said that I was preventing a truly gifted child from reaching her potential. She told me that Katie's teacher had said she was one of the most talented students she'd ever taught, and that limiting her practice time could hurt her chances in the summer program. Linda said that I should want to help foster musical talent in the community. I tried to be polite and said that I hoped Katie would find a good practice solution, but that our family piano wasn't available for other students to use. Linda said that Emma would benefit from hearing Katie play and that I was being short-sighted about what was best for my own daughter. Then, Linda pulled out her phone and showed me a video of Katie playing a complex classical piece. She said that this was the level Katie was performing at, and asked if I really thought Emma's simple pieces were more important than Katie's advanced repertoire. I felt like Linda was trying to make me feel bad about Emma's skill level, which wasn't fair to either of our daughters. I told her that every student deserved access to practice time regardless of their current ability level. Linda then offered to pay us $20 per practice session for Katie to use our piano. When I declined that as well, she said she'd pay $50 per session. I explained that it wasn't about money, but about the disruption to our family's routine and Emma's practice schedule. Linda got really pushy at that point. She said that Emma was holding back a more deserving student, and that I should think about the bigger picture. She claimed that supporting advanced students was more important for the musical community than protecting beginners. I told Linda that this conversation was over, and that I needed to find Emma so we could leave. As I walked away, Linda called after me that I was being selfish and that Emma would never improve if she wasn't exposed to higher level playing. Emma had overheard part of the conversation and asked me what the woman wanted. I explained that she had asked about piano practice time, and Emma said she didn't want to share our piano because it was special to her. I assured her that our piano would stay exactly where it belonged. The next week, I got a call from Emma's piano teacher. She said that Linda had contacted her asking for my phone number and suggesting that Emma might benefit from joint practice sessions with Katie. The teacher said she had declined to give out my contact information and wanted me to know about the request. I thanked the teacher for respecting our privacy and told her about the conversation at the recital. She said she'd dealt with pushy parents before, and that Katie was welcome to practice at the music school during their open practice hours. A few days later, I saw Linda at the grocery store, and she approached me again. She said she'd been thinking about our conversation and had a new proposal. She suggested that Emma could take lessons at Katie's level if she had access to better practice conditions. I told Linda that Emma was happy with her current progress and that we weren't looking to accelerate her learning. Linda said that I was limiting Emma's potential and that exposure to advanced students would motivate her to work harder. I ended the conversation and haven't spoken to Linda since, but Emma mentioned that Katie had asked her at their next lesson if she could come practice at our house. I felt bad that Linda had put Katie in the position of asking directly, but I'm glad Emma felt comfortable saying no. That's the end of that story. The nerve of demanding access to someone else's piano because your child is supposedly more talented is absolutely staggering. This woman really thought that musical ability created some kind of hierarchy where advanced students deserved other people's instruments. The fact that she tried to go through the teacher and then put her own daughter in the awkward position of asking directly shows how far some parents will go to get what they want. Let's move on to our next story, which involves a parent who thought their child's athletic aspirations overrode basic fairness and honesty. I'm Mike, and I coach Little League Baseball for 8 and 9-year-olds in our community. I've been doing this for about 4 years now, and I really enjoy working with kids and teaching them about teamwork and sportsmanship. Our league has a pretty straightforward rule that every kid gets equal playing time regardless of their skill level. This season, we had this new player named Trevor, whose father, Dave, was extremely involved from day one. Dave would show up early to every practice and stay late, constantly giving Trevor additional coaching and tips. Nothing wrong with that kind of parental support, but Dave also had very strong opinions about how the team should be run. Trevor was actually a pretty good player for his age, definitely one of the stronger kids on the team. He could hit consistently and had good fielding skills. But our league policy was that every child rotates through different positions and gets equal time at bat, which I think is important for development and fairness. About halfway through the season, Dave approached me after practice and said he wanted to discuss Trevor's development. He said that Trevor was clearly one of the most talented players on the team and should be getting more opportunities to play in key positions like pitcher and first base. I explained our league's equal playing time policy and said that all the kids would continue rotating through different positions so they could learn different skills. Dave said that policy was holding back talented players and that Trevor should be playing where he could have the most impact. I told him that at this age level, the focus was on learning and having fun rather than winning games. Dave said that was a nice sentiment, but that Trevor had real potential and needed to be challenged and developed properly. Then Dave suggested that some of the weaker players on the team should get less playing time so that stronger players like Trevor could get more opportunities. He said it wasn't fair to treat all players equally when their skill levels were obviously different. I was pretty shocked by this suggestion and reminded him that our league specifically existed to give all kids equal opportunities to play and learn. Dave said that equal opportunity was fine in theory, but that in practice it meant holding back kids who could excel. Dave then told me that Trevor had been recruited by a more competitive travel team and that his development this season would determine whether they accepted him. He said that Trevor needed to demonstrate his abilities in game situations, which meant playing in key positions more frequently. I explained that if Trevor wanted to pursue more competitive baseball, that was great, but that our community league had different goals and policies. Dave said that I was being inflexible and not thinking about what was best for the most talented players. The conversation got more intense when Dave said that Trevor was being wasted on a team where equal playing time was more important than developing talent. He suggested that I should consider the long-term impact on Trevor's baseball career. I told Dave that 8 and 9-year-old children shouldn't be worried about their baseball careers and that our league prioritized fun and learning over competition. Dave said that attitude was why American youth sports were falling behind other countries. Then Dave made a proposal that really crossed the line. He said that if I would give Trevor more playing time in key positions, he would donate $500 to the league equipment fund. He said it would be a win-win situation because the whole team would benefit from better equipment. I was appalled and told him that playing time couldn't be purchased and that all decisions would continue to be based on our equal opportunity policy. Dave said I was being naive and that other coaches would jump at the chance to improve their team's resources. Dave then tried a different approach. He said that some of the other parents had complained to him about their kids being placed in positions where they struggled. He claimed that the parents of less skilled players would actually prefer their children to have less pressure. I told him that I'd never received any such complaints and that the parents I'd spoken with appreciated the equal playing time policy. Dave said that parents wouldn't complain directly to me, but that they'd expressed frustrations to other parents. The situation escalated when Dave started showing up to games with a stopwatch, timing how long each player spent in different positions. He would approach me between innings with his data, showing that Trevor wasn't getting equal time in the positions he considered most important. I had to explain that position rotation was about exposing kids to different skills, not about giving each child identical time in each specific position. Dave said that explanation was just a way to avoid giving the best players the opportunities they deserved. Dave's behavior started affecting other parents and players. Some of the other dads mentioned that Dave had approached them about supporting his request for Trevor to get more playing time. He'd told them that better players getting more opportunities would make the whole team more successful. The breaking point came during our second-to-last game of the season. Trevor was playing second base when a ground ball came his way. He made a great play and got the runner out, and Dave immediately started yelling that Trevor should be playing second base all the time because he was obviously the best fielder. After the game, Dave confronted me in front of several other parents and said that I was hurting Trevor's development by not recognizing his superior abilities. He said that equal playing time was a nice idea, but that real coaching meant making decisions based on talent. I calmly explained once again that our league policy would continue to be followed and that all players would keep getting equal opportunities. Dave said that he was going to file a complaint with the league administration about my coaching decisions. The next week, I got a call from the league coordinator saying that Dave had indeed filed a formal complaint. He'd alleged that I was mismanaging playing time and not developing talented players properly. The coordinator said they'd reviewed our game logs and that I was clearly following league policy correctly. Dave ended up pulling Trevor from the team for the final game, saying that he didn't want Trevor's development to be hindered any further. He told the other parents that he was moving Trevor to a more competitive team where talent would be properly recognised and developed. I felt bad for Trevor, who seemed to enjoy playing with his teammates and had never complained about playing time or positions. The other kids asked where Trevor was for the final game, and I explained that his family had decided to pursue other baseball opportunities. That's the end of that story. The entitlement of trying to buy extra playing time for your child and then attempting to manipulate league policies based on supposed talent is just incredible. This father was so focused on his son's advancement that he completely missed the point of youth recreational sports. The fact that he tried to bribe a coach and then filed false complaints when that didn't work shows how far some parents will go to give their children unfair advantages. Our next story takes us to a wedding venue, where apparently some parents think their children's presence automatically makes them the most important guests. My name is Jennifer, and I got married last month after 2 years of planning what I thought would be the perfect day. My husband and I had specifically chosen to have an adults-only wedding reception. We love kids, but we wanted our celebration to be more formal and intimate, so we made it clear on our invitations that the reception would be for adults only. My cousin Rachel has 2 young children, ages 4 and 6, and when she RSVP'd, she asked if there would be any exceptions to the adults-only policy. I explained that we'd decided to keep it consistent for all guests, but that we'd love to celebrate with her kids at a later family gathering. Rachel seemed understanding and said she'd arrange for a babysitter for the evening. I was grateful that she was being so accommodating and looked forward to celebrating with her at the reception. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything was going perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful, and we were all heading to the reception venue when I noticed Rachel walking in with both of her children. I was confused because I thought she'd arranged childcare. I approached Rachel during the cocktail hour and gently asked about the kids. She said that her babysitter had cancelled last minute and that she couldn't find anyone else to watch them. She apologised for bringing them, but said she didn't want to miss my wedding. I understood that babysitter cancellations happen, but I was also concerned about maintaining the adults-only atmosphere we'd planned. I suggested that maybe she could take the kids home and come back later, or that her husband could stay with them while she attended part of the reception. Rachel said that they'd driven 2 hours to get to the wedding, and that leaving and coming back wasn't practical. She promised that the kids would be well behaved, and that no one would even notice they were there. I was in a difficult position because I didn't want to exclude Rachel, but I also didn't want to make exceptions that other guests might feel were unfair. I decided to let it go for the moment and figured we could handle it quietly. During dinner, Rachel's kids were actually pretty well behaved, though they were clearly getting restless as the evening went on. Other guests started noticing that there were children present, and a couple of people made comments to me about the adults-only policy. Things got complicated when the DJ started playing music for dancing. Rachel's 4-year-old immediately ran onto the dance floor and started spinning around and falling down. It was actually pretty cute, but it wasn't the atmosphere we'd planned for. Other guests started commenting on how adorable the kids were, but I could tell that some people were also confused about why children were there when the invitation had specifically said adults only. The real problem started when Rachel approached me during the dancing and said that her 6-year-old was getting hungry. She asked if there was any way to get a kid's meal for him since he hadn't been able to eat much of the adult dinner options. I explained that we hadn't ordered any children's meals because the reception was supposed to be adults only. Rachel said that I should ask the caterer if they could make something simple like chicken fingers or a peanut butter sandwich. I was getting frustrated because this was exactly the kind of situation I'd hoped to avoid by having an adults-only event. I told Rachel that I'd check with the caterer, but that I couldn't guarantee they'd be able to accommodate a last-minute meal request. Rachel then said something that really bothered me. She told me that I was being inflexible and that any good host would find a way to feed a hungry child. She said that my wedding shouldn't be more important than a 6-year-old's basic needs. I was taken aback because I felt like I was being blamed for a situation that Rachel had created by bringing uninvited guests to my wedding. I reminded her that the invitation had clearly stated adults only and that she'd confirmed she was arranging childcare. Rachel got defensive and said that unexpected situations happen and that family should be understanding and flexible. She said that excluding children from family celebrations was outdated and unfriendly. The situation escalated when Rachel's 4-year-old had a meltdown on the dance floor because he was tired and overstimulated. He started crying loudly and couldn't be consoled, which disrupted the music and dancing. Rachel tried to calm him down, but other guests were starting to stare, and the mood of the reception was definitely affected. I felt terrible for the child, but I was also frustrated that my carefully planned adults-only event was being derailed. Rachel then asked if there was somewhere quiet where the kids could take a nap until the reception was over. She suggested that they could sleep in a back room or office area while she continued to enjoy the party. I explained that the venue didn't have appropriate sleeping accommodations for children and that leaving them unattended wouldn't be safe or appropriate. Rachel said I was being unreasonable and that she'd supervised them sleeping at events before. At this point, my new husband intervened and suggested that Rachel might want to consider taking the kids home since they seemed tired and overwhelmed. Rachel said that we were being unwelcoming and that she'd never been to a family wedding where children weren't accommodated. Rachel then made a comment that really hurt. She said that my wedding was more about appearances than about celebrating with family, and that I'd prioritized my perfect day over including the people who mattered most. I tried to explain that we'd made our decision about the adults-only reception for specific reasons, and that it wasn't personal against her children. Rachel said that decisions like that were always personal, and that I was showing my true priorities. The situation came to a head when Rachel announced loudly to several other family members that she was leaving because her children weren't welcome at their cousin's wedding. She made it sound like I was throwing them out, rather than acknowledging that she'd brought uninvited guests. Several relatives approached me, asking what had happened and whether there had been some misunderstanding about the invitation. I had to explain the whole situation while trying to maintain my composure on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Rachel gathered up her kids and left, but not before making several more comments to other guests about how disappointing it was that family wasn't more important than wedding rules. She made sure everyone could hear her talking about how unwelcoming we were being. The rest of the reception continued, but the energy had definitely shifted. Some family members seemed uncomfortable about the conflict, and I spent more time than I wanted explaining our adults-only policy to various relatives. Later, I found out that Rachel had posted on social media about being excluded from my wedding reception because she was a parent. She painted the situation as discrimination against families and said she'd never felt so unwelcome at a family event. Several relatives reached out to me after seeing her posts, and I had to explain the actual situation. Most people understood our position once they heard the full story, but the drama definitely cast a shadow over what should have been a completely joyful celebration. That's the end of that story. The manipulation of bringing uninvited children to an adults-only event and then playing the victim when accommodations weren't perfect is just staggering. This woman crashed someone's carefully planned wedding with her kids and then demanded special meals and sleeping arrangements while acting like the couple was being unreasonable. The fact that she turned it into a social media drama about discrimination shows how far some parents will go to avoid taking responsibility for their own choices. Let's move to our next story about a parent who thought their child's academic needs justified taking over someone else's private property. I'm David, and I work from home as a software developer. My house has a separate office space that I converted from what used to be a small garage. It's got great lighting, reliable internet, and all the equipment I need to do my job effectively. It's also completely soundproofed, which is important because I often have video calls with clients. My next-door neighbor is a single mom named Carol, who has a 15-year-old daughter named Madison. Carol and I have always had a friendly relationship, and Madison seems like a good kid who's involved in lots of school activities. About 2 months ago, Carol approached me while I was getting my mail and mentioned that Madison was having trouble focusing on her homework. She said their house was pretty small and that Madison didn't have a quiet space to study, especially when Carol was watching TV or making dinner in the evening. I sympathized and said that finding good study space could definitely be challenging in smaller homes. Carol asked if I had any suggestions for places where Madison could go to focus on her homework, like libraries or coffee shops. I mentioned that our local library had study rooms and that there were a couple of quiet cafes downtown that might work for studying. Carol said she'd already looked into those options, but that the library rooms had to be reserved in advance, and the cafes weren't always available or appropriate for extended study sessions. Then Carol said something that caught me off guard. She asked if Madison could use my home office for studying after school. She explained that she knew I had a separate workspace and thought it might be perfect for Madison's homework needs. I was surprised by the request and explained that my office was where I worked during the day and that I often had evening calls with clients in different time zones. Carol said that Madison would only need it for a couple of hours each evening and that she'd be very quiet and respectful. I told her that having someone else in my workspace while I was trying to work wouldn't really be practical. Carol said that Madison was very mature and wouldn't be disruptive at all. She suggested that they could work out a schedule so Madison would only use the office when I wasn't actively working. I explained that my work schedule was pretty unpredictable and that I sometimes needed to access my office for urgent calls or projects without advance notice. Carol said that Madison was flexible and could leave immediately if I needed the space. I politely declined and suggested that Madison might be able to find other quiet spaces in their own home, like her bedroom or the kitchen table during certain hours. Carol said they'd already tried those options and that none of them provided the level of focus that Madison needed for her advanced coursework. Carol then mentioned that Madison was taking several AP classes and that her grades could affect her college applications. She said that having access to a proper study environment could make a real difference in Madison's academic success. I felt bad for Madison's situation, but I also wasn't comfortable having a teenager using my private workspace on a regular basis. I suggested that Carol might look into converting a space in their own home or setting up better study conditions in Madison's room. Carol said they'd already considered those options, but that their house was just too small and busy to create an effective study environment. She said that my office was exactly what Madison needed and that it would mean so much to have access to that kind of space. Then Carol made an offer that really surprised me. She said that Madison could help with yard work or household chores in exchange for study time in my office. She suggested that it could be a mutually beneficial arrangement. I appreciated the offer, but explained that I didn't really need help with yard work and that the main issue was privacy and workflow disruption rather than compensation. Carol said that Madison was very responsible and that I probably wouldn't even notice she was there. Carol then tried a different approach. She said that helping young people succeed academically was something that benefited the whole community. She mentioned that Madison was involved in several school leadership activities and that supporting her education would have positive ripple effects. I acknowledged that Madison seemed like a great kid and that education was important, but I maintained that my home office wasn't available for others to use. Carol said she was disappointed that I wasn't willing to help a neighbor in need. The conversation got more uncomfortable when Carol said that I had more space than I really needed, and that sharing resources was what good neighbors did. She pointed out that my office sat empty for hours each day, while Madison struggled to find adequate study space. I explained that just because a space wasn't actively being used at every moment didn't mean it was available for others to use. Carol said that, was a selfish way to think about community resources, and that people with extra space should help those who needed it. Carol then suggested that we could try a trial period where Madison used the office for just 1 week to see how it worked out. She promised that if there were any problems or disruptions, they would immediately stop the arrangement. I declined the trial period and reiterated that my office needed to remain private for professional reasons. Carol said that I was making excuses and that the real issue was that I didn't want to help a hard-working student succeed. The pressure didn't stop there. Over the next few days, Carol would approach me whenever she saw me outside and bring up Madison's study situation. She'd mention specific assignments or tests that Madison was working on and how much easier they would be with access to a proper study environment. Carol also started having Madison approach me directly. The teenager would mention her homework struggles and talk about how much she wished she had a quiet place to focus. I felt like I was being emotionally manipulated by both mother and daughter. The situation escalated when Carol suggested that Madison could use my office during my lunch breaks or other times when I stepped away from work. She said it would just be for 30 or 45-minute periods and that Madison could be very flexible with timing. I explained that even short interruptions to my workspace could be disruptive and that I needed to maintain boundaries around my professional environment. Carol said that I was being inflexible and that successful people found ways to help others while maintaining their own productivity. Carol then implied that my refusal to help Madison was affecting the teenager's academic performance. She said that Madison had been struggling with concentration at home and that her grades in AP classes were suffering as a result. I felt terrible about Madison's academic challenges, but I also knew that allowing access to my office wouldn't be appropriate or sustainable. I suggested that Carol contact the school about study hall options or look into local tutoring centres that might have quiet study spaces. Carol rejected those suggestions and said that none of those options provided the kind of dedicated, quiet environment that Madison needed. She said that my office was the perfect solution and that I was the only person who could help Madison reach her academic potential. The final straw came when Carol suggested that I had a moral obligation to help Madison succeed. She said that people with advantages and resources should use them to support young people in the community, especially those who were working hard to improve their circumstances. I told Carol that while I appreciated her concern for Madison's education, my home office would remain private, and that I hoped they'd find other solutions for her study needs. Carol said she was disappointed in me and that she'd expected better from someone in my position. I haven't spoken to Carol since that conversation, and I've noticed that she's been giving me cold looks whenever we encounter each other around the neighbourhood. I feel bad for Madison, who seems caught in the middle of this situation that she probably didn't ask for. That's the end of that story. The escalating pressure to turn over private workspace to a neighbour's child is just incredible. This woman really thought that academic need created an automatic right to use someone else's home office. The manipulation of using the daughter to make personal appeals, while framing it as a moral obligation, shows how some parents will weaponize their children's struggles to get what they want from others. Our next story involves a parent who learned that veterinary emergencies don't give you the right to commandeer other people's pets. I'm Lisa, and I have a 3-year-old German Shepherd named Rex, who's been my constant companion since I adopted him as a puppy. Rex is incredibly well trained, great with people, and honestly one of the smartest dogs I've ever known. He goes everywhere with me that dogs are allowed, and we've developed an amazing bond over the years. Last Saturday, I was at the dog park with Rex around 10 in the morning. It's a large fenced area where dogs can run off leash and socialise with other dogs. Rex loves it there, and we usually spend about an hour letting him play and exercise. There was this family at the park with a small mixed breed dog that looked to be having some kind of health issue. The dog was breathing heavily and seemed lethargic, lying in the shade while other dogs played around the park. The family consisted of what appeared to be parents and 2 children, probably around 8 and 10 years old. The kids kept trying to get their dog to play, but the animal clearly wasn't feeling well and just wanted to rest. I was sitting on one of the benches, reading while Rex played with some other dogs, when the father from this family approached me. He introduced himself as Mark and said he'd been watching Rex and was impressed with how well behaved and responsive he was. I thanked him and said that Rex and I had put a lot of time into training and that he was naturally a pretty smart dog. Mark said his family was dealing with a pet emergency and asked if I might be able to help them out. I asked what kind of emergency they were experiencing, thinking maybe they needed directions to a veterinary clinic or had questions about dog first aid. Mark explained that their dog, Buddy, had been sick for the past couple of days and seemed to be getting worse. I suggested that they should probably take Buddy to see a veterinarian as soon as possible, especially if his condition was deteriorating. Mark said they'd already called several vet offices, but that none of them had same-day appointments available. I sympathized and mentioned that emergency veterinary clinics were available for urgent situations, though they could be more expensive than regular vet visits. Mark said they'd looked into that option, but that the emergency clinic was quite expensive and they weren't sure they could afford it. I felt bad for their situation and suggested they call around to more veterinary offices or see if any clinics had cancellation lists they could get on. Mark thanked me for the suggestions, but then said something that completely surprised me. He asked if they could borrow Rex for a few hours to help comfort Buddy during his illness. Mark explained that sometimes sick dogs feel better when they have companionship from healthy dogs, and that Rex seemed like he'd be a calming presence. I was taken aback and told him that I didn't think it was a good idea to expose Rex to a sick dog, especially when I didn't know what Buddy's illness might be. Mark said that Buddy's symptoms didn't seem contagious, and that having Rex around might actually help Buddy feel better. I explained that I wasn't comfortable lending my dog to strangers, particularly in a situation involving an illness. Mark said that his kids were really upset about Buddy being sick, and that having Rex visit might cheer them up while they figured out medical care. I suggested that their focus should be on getting Buddy proper veterinary attention, rather than on arranging social visits with other dogs. Mark said they were working on the vet situation, but that it would be hours before they could get an appointment anywhere. Mark then said something that really concerned me. He mentioned that Rex was obviously a healthy, strong dog, and that Buddy might benefit from some of Rex's energy and vitality. It sounded like he was suggesting some kind of mystical healing through dog interaction. I told Mark that I really thought a veterinarian was the only appropriate solution for a sick dog, and that social interaction with other pets wasn't a substitute for medical care. Mark said that he understood that, but that every little bit of comfort could help Buddy feel better. The conversation took an even stranger turn when Mark said that Rex looked like he had healing energy, and that some dogs were naturally therapeutic for other animals. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable with the direction this was going. I told Mark that Rex and I needed to leave soon, and that I really hoped they'd be able to get Buddy to a veterinarian quickly. Mark then made a proposal that absolutely floored me. He asked if they could take Rex home with them for the rest of the day to help Buddy through his illness. I was shocked and told him that absolutely was not going to happen. Mark said that Rex could really make a difference for Buddy, and that I'd be helping save a dog's life by letting them borrow him. I explained that Rex was my dog and my responsibility, and that I would never leave him with people I didn't know. Mark said that it would just be for a few hours, and that they'd take excellent care of Rex while he helped Buddy recover. Mark then tried to guilt me by pointing out that his children were watching our conversation and hoping that the nice lady with the healthy dog would help their sick pet. I looked over and saw the kids standing near Buddy, who did look quite unwell. I felt terrible for the family's situation, but I told Mark that taking my dog wasn't a solution to their problem, and that they needed to focus on getting professional medical help for Buddy. Mark said that I was being selfish and that any dog lover would want to help a sick animal. Mark then offered to pay me $50 to let them take Rex for the afternoon. When I declined, he said he'd pay $100. I explained that Rex wasn't available at any price, and that this whole conversation was inappropriate. The situation got more intense when Mark's wife joined the conversation. She said that Buddy was getting worse, and that they were desperate to try anything that might help him feel better. She said that Rex seemed like such a sweet dog, and that he might be exactly what Buddy needed. I reiterated that a sick dog needed veterinary care, not a playdate with a stranger's pet. Mark's wife said that they were trying to arrange vet care, but that it was taking time, and Buddy needed comfort in the meantime. Mark then suggested that I could come with them to their house so I could supervise Rex while he spent time with Buddy. He said it would just be for an hour or two, and that I could see firsthand how much it would mean to their family. I declined and said that Rex and I were leaving the dog park. As I was putting Rex on his leash, Mark made one final appeal. He said that if Rex was sick, he'd want other dog owners to help out, and that this was about the community of dog lovers supporting each other. I told him that if Rex was sick, I'd take him to a veterinarian, not ask strangers to loan me their pets. Mark said that not everyone had the same resources, and that people with healthy dogs should be willing to help those whose pets were struggling. As Rex and I were walking toward the parking lot, Mark's wife called after us that we were abandoning a sick dog that we could have helped. She said that Rex might have been Buddy's only chance to feel better before they could get to a vet. I felt guilty about leaving when their dog was clearly unwell, but I also knew that what they were asking for was completely inappropriate and potentially dangerous for Rex. I hoped they would get Buddy proper medical attention soon. Later that evening, I saw a post in our local community Facebook group from Mark's wife, asking if anyone had recommendations for affordable emergency veterinary care. I was relieved to see that they were pursuing appropriate medical help for Buddy. That's the end of that story. The idea that a healthy dog could somehow cure a sick one through proximity is absolutely bizarre, and expecting a stranger to hand over their pet for amateur veterinary therapy is just staggering. This family was so desperate about their dog's illness that they lost all sense of appropriate boundaries and tried to involve someone else's animal in their crisis. I hope Buddy got the real medical care he needed. Our final story comes from someone who discovered that even graduation ceremonies aren't safe from entitled parent interference. My name is Alex, and I just graduated with my master's degree in engineering after 3 years of incredibly hard work. It was a huge accomplishment for me, especially since I'd been working full-time while completing the program. The graduation ceremony was being held at our university's main auditorium, and each graduate was allowed 4 guest tickets. I had given my tickets to my parents, my girlfriend, and my younger brother, who had all been incredibly supportive throughout my studies. I was really looking forward to having them there to celebrate this milestone with me. On the morning of graduation, we were all gathered in the staging area, getting our caps and gowns organized and taking photos before the ceremony began. The atmosphere was really exciting, with graduates and families celebrating together. I was adjusting my cap and checking my appearance in my phone camera when this woman approached me. She was probably in her 50s and seemed somewhat frantic. She said her name was Patricia and that she was the mother of one of the other graduates. Patricia explained that her family had encountered a problem with their graduation tickets. She said that her daughter Sarah was graduating with her bachelor's degree and that more family members had arrived than they had tickets for. I felt bad for their situation and asked if there was anything the university could do to help with additional tickets. Patricia said she'd already spoken to the administration office and that they'd told her all tickets were distributed and no extras were available. Patricia then said something that surprised me. She asked if I would be willing to give her one of my guest tickets since her family needed it more than mine did. She explained that Sarah had relatives who had travelled from across the country specifically for the graduation. I told her that I understood their situation was frustrating, but that I'd already given all 4 of my tickets to family members who were planning to attend. Patricia said that surely I could ask one of my guests to stay home so that Sarah's family could have a complete celebration. I was taken aback and explained that my family had also made plans and travel arrangements to be there for my graduation. Patricia said that a master's degree graduation wasn't as important as a bachelor's degree graduation because Sarah was achieving her first major academic milestone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told Patricia that all graduations were important to the people achieving them and that I wasn't willing to exclude any of my family members from my ceremony. Patricia then asked which of my guests would be least disappointed to miss the graduation. She suggested that my brother, being younger, might not fully understand the significance and could watch a live stream instead. I was getting frustrated and told Patricia that I wasn't going to rank my family members by importance or ask any of them to give up their seats. Patricia said that I was being selfish and not considering the needs of other families. Patricia then tried a different approach. She said that Sarah had struggled academically throughout college and that this graduation was especially meaningful for their family. She claimed that having extended family there would mean more to Sarah than it would to me. I pointed out that Patricia didn't know anything about my academic journey or how meaningful this graduation was to my family. She said that people pursuing advanced degrees obviously had family support already, while Sarah had overcome challenges without much help. The conversation got more uncomfortable when Patricia said that I looked like someone who came from privilege and probably took family support for granted. She made assumptions about my background and financial situation that were completely off base. I tried to end the conversation by saying that I hoped Sarah's family would find a solution, but that I couldn't give up any of my tickets. Patricia said that I was prioritizing my own celebration over helping another student have her family present. Patricia then made an offer that really crossed the line. She said she would pay me $200 for one guest ticket. When I declined, she said she'd pay $300 and that Sarah's grandparents had specifically saved money to attend the graduation. I explained that the tickets weren't for sale and that even if they were, I wouldn't exclude my own family from my graduation ceremony. Patricia said that $300 was more than fair and that I was being unreasonable by refusing. Patricia then tried emotional manipulation by describing how disappointed Sarah's elderly grandparents would be if they couldn't attend their granddaughter's graduation. She said they'd driven 8 hours specifically for the ceremony. I felt bad for the grandparents' situation, but I pointed out that poor planning on their family's part didn't create an obligation for me to solve their problem. Patricia said that unexpected family attendance was hardly poor planning and that I should be more understanding. The situation escalated when Patricia suggested that the university should have given extra tickets to students whose families had greater need. She said that distributing tickets equally wasn't fair when some families had more people who wanted to attend. I told her that equal distribution seemed like the most fair approach and that everyone had received the same opportunity to plan their guest list accordingly. Patricia said that approach discriminated against students with large, close-knit families. Patricia then started following me around the staging area, continuing to pressure me about the ticket situation. She introduced me to Sarah, who seemed embarrassed by her mother's behavior and kept saying that the grandparents would understand if they couldn't attend. Patricia ignored her daughter's protests and kept insisting that one of my family members should give up their seat for Sarah's grandparents. She said that younger people like my brother could attend future graduations, but that elderly grandparents might not have other opportunities. I felt like Patricia was putting both Sarah and me in an incredibly awkward position. Sarah clearly didn't want her mother harassing other graduates, but Patricia seemed determined to get what she wanted regardless of how inappropriate her approach was. The final straw came when Patricia approached my family directly during the pre-ceremony reception. She introduced herself to my parents and brother and explained that they needed extra tickets for Sarah's family. Patricia told my family that she'd spoken to me about giving up a ticket and that I'd seemed open to the idea. This was completely untrue, and I had to correct her misrepresentation in front of my confused family members. My mother politely told Patricia that we were all excited to attend my graduation and that they'd made travel plans specifically for the ceremony. Patricia said that they could easily watch online and that their presence wasn't as crucial as that of Sarah's grandparents. My father stepped in and told Patricia that her request was inappropriate and that she needed to leave our family alone. Patricia said that she was just trying to help her daughter have the graduation celebration she deserved. I finally had to be direct and tell Patricia to stop approaching me and my family about tickets. She said that I was being selfish and unsympathetic to other students' needs, and that my attitude reflected poorly on the values taught at our university. The graduation ceremony proceeded beautifully, and I was so grateful to have my family there to celebrate with me. I spotted Sarah in the crowd of graduates and was relieved to see that she seemed to be enjoying her moment despite her mother's earlier dramatics. After the ceremony, I saw Patricia in the reception area, still complaining to other families about the university's ticket policy. She was telling anyone who would listen about how unfair the distribution system was and how some students had received preferential treatment. I felt bad for Sarah, who seemed like a nice person caught in an embarrassing situation created by her mother's entitled behaviour. I hoped she was able to celebrate her achievement without being overshadowed by the ticket drama. That's the end of that story. The nerve of approaching strangers at graduation and demanding they exclude their own family members so yours can attend is absolutely staggering. This woman really thought she could emotionally manipulate and financially pressure someone into giving up their graduation tickets. The fact that she misrepresented the conversation to this person's family shows how far some parents will go to get what they want, even when it means lying and creating uncomfortable situations for everyone involved. Our final story for tonight comes from someone who learned that entitled parents think housing should be redistributed based on family size rather than lease agreements. My name is Chris, and I live in a really nice one-bedroom apartment in a popular downtown area. I've been renting this place for about 2 years now, and it's perfect for my needs. The rent is reasonable for the location, and I love being within walking distance of work, restaurants, and entertainment. The apartment building has about 20 units, and most of the tenants are young professionals like myself. There are a few families, but the majority of the building consists of single people or couples who enjoy the urban lifestyle. About 6 months ago, a new family moved into the unit across the hall from me. It's a mother, father, and 3 children who appear to range in age from about 5 to 12 years old. The apartment they moved into is identical to mine, a one-bedroom unit that was clearly designed for 1 or 2 people maximum. I felt bad for the family because 5 people in a one-bedroom apartment had to be incredibly cramped and uncomfortable. The kids were always in the hallway playing because there wasn't enough space inside their unit, which I completely understood. The mother, whose name I learned was Janet, seemed friendly enough when we passed in the hallway. She would always say hello and make small talk about the building or the neighbourhood. Her children were polite and well-behaved whenever I encountered them. About 3 weeks after they moved in, Janet approached me while I was getting my mail and started making conversation about how we were neighbours now. She mentioned that her family was still adjusting to their new living situation and finding it challenging to fit everyone comfortably in their apartment. I sympathised and said that downtown apartments were generally pretty small and that it must be difficult managing with 3 children in such a compact space. Janet said it was definitely a challenge, but that they were grateful to have found anything in this neighbourhood. Janet then asked me about my apartment layout and whether it was similar to theirs. I confirmed that it was the same one-bedroom floor plan and mentioned that it worked well for me as a single person. Janet seemed very interested in hearing about how I used the space and asked specific questions about my bedroom, living room, and kitchen areas. I thought she was just curious about layout options or looking for ideas to maximize their own space. Then Janet said something that caught me completely off guard. She asked if I would be interested in switching apartments with her family. She explained that they really needed more space and that my unit would be better suited for a family. I was confused and asked what she meant by switching apartments, since both units were identical one-bedroom layouts. Janet said that my apartment faced east and got better morning light, while theirs faced west and was darker in the mornings. I told her that I was happy with my apartment and wasn't interested in switching. Janet said that the morning light would be really important for her children's daily routine, and that families with kids should have priority for the best units. I explained that the light difference was probably minimal and that I had specifically chosen my apartment when I moved in. Janet said that she understood I liked my apartment, but that her family's needs were greater than mine. Janet then mentioned that she'd noticed I lived alone and asked if I really needed an entire one-bedroom apartment to myself. She suggested that a studio apartment would probably be sufficient for my needs and that families required more space. I was taken aback and told her that the size of apartment I chose was based on what I could afford and what made me comfortable. Janet said that single people should be more conscious of taking up housing that families needed. The conversation got more uncomfortable when Janet asked if I would consider moving to a smaller unit in the building if one became available. She said that would free up my current apartment for her family, who would make better use of the space. I told Janet that I had a lease agreement for my specific apartment and wasn't planning to move. She said that lease agreements could be transferred and that she'd be happy to take over my lease if I found something smaller. Janet then offered to pay me to switch apartments. She said she'd give me $500 to cover moving expenses if I would trade units with her family. When I declined, she said she could offer $750. I explained that money wasn't the issue and that I simply wasn't interested in moving. Janet said that $750 was a lot of money for something that would barely inconvenience me, but would make a huge difference for her children. Janet then tried a different approach. She said that her children were having trouble sleeping because the western-facing windows made their apartment too hot in the evenings. She claimed that the heat was affecting their health and school performance. I suggested that they could install blackout curtains or use fans to manage the temperature. Janet said they'd already tried those solutions, and that the only real fix was to get an apartment with better sun exposure. The situation escalated when Janet started involving her children in the conversations. She would have them mention to me how crowded their apartment was, and how much they would love to have more space to play. Janet also began timing her appearances in the hallway to coincide with when I was coming or going. She would bring up the apartment switch idea regularly, always with new reasons why it would benefit her family. Janet then approached my landlord directly to ask about transferring leases between units. She told him that her family needed my apartment for health and safety reasons, and that I had expressed interest in moving to something smaller. My landlord called me to ask about the lease transfer request, and I had to explain that I'd never expressed any interest in moving, and that Janet had been pressuring me to switch apartments. He assured me that my lease was secure and that no changes would be made without my consent. Janet wasn't deterred by the landlord's response. She started leaving notes under my door, explaining why her family deserved my apartment more than I did. The notes mentioned her children's need for space, the importance of good lighting for their development, and how single people should be more community-minded. The notes became more frequent and more demanding. Janet would cite articles about child development and housing needs, arguing that families with children should have priority for better apartments in residential buildings. Janet then enlisted other tenants in the building to support her cause. She told several neighbours that I was selfishly hoarding a family-sized apartment while her children suffered in inadequate housing. Some tenants approached me, asking if I'd consider helping Janet's family by switching apartments. They'd been told that I was resistant to reasonable requests, and that my refusal was hurting the children's well-being. I had to explain to multiple neighbours that both apartments were identical in size, and that Janet's family would not actually gain any additional space by switching units. Most people understood once they heard the full situation. Janet then started having her children knock on my door directly to ask about the apartment switch. The kids would say that their mum had sent them to ask if I'd reconsidered moving so they could have more room to play. I felt terrible having to explain to young children that the apartment situation was between adults and that they shouldn't be involved in these discussions. It was clear that Janet was using her kids as emotional leverage. The final straw came when Janet contacted my workplace, trying to reach me about the apartment situation. She told my colleagues that we were neighbours dealing with a housing issue and that she needed to speak with me urgently. My boss mentioned the call to me, and I had to explain that it was a personal matter involving a pushy neighbour who wouldn't take no for an answer. I was embarrassed that Janet had involved my professional life in her apartment demands. I ended up having to file a complaint with building management about Janet's harassment. The property manager spoke with her about appropriate tenant behaviour and told her to stop pressuring other residents about housing arrangements. Janet's behaviour stopped after the management intervention, but she's given me cold stares ever since. I occasionally still hear her telling other tenants about how unfair the housing distribution is in the building. I feel bad for her children, who seem like good kids caught in a situation created by their mother's entitlement and poor planning. But I'm relieved that I don't have to deal with constant pressure to give up my home anymore. That's the end of that story. The audacity of demanding someone give up their lease because you think families deserve housing more than single people is absolutely mind-blowing. This woman really thought that having children created an automatic right to other people's apartments, even when both units were identical in size. The escalation from polite requests to workplace harassment shows how far some entitled parents will go when they can't get their way. These stories really show how some parents will use their children as justification for the most outrageous demands and manipulative behaviour. Whether it's demanding access to other people's property, trying to change established rules and policies, or expecting strangers to sacrifice their own special moments. These entitled parents seem to believe that having children gives them the right to whatever they want from others. The common thread in all these stories is the complete lack of respect for other people's boundaries, property, and rights. These parents teach their children that wanting something badly enough means you deserve it, and that other people exist to solve your problems and fulfill your needs. What's particularly disturbing is how many of these parents use emotional manipulation, guilt trips, and even their own children as weapons to try to get their way. They'll paint themselves as victims when people refuse to give them what they want, and they'll twist situations to make reasonable people look selfish or mean. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more every evening, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about these entitled parent encounters. Have you ever dealt with situations like these? I'd love to hear your experiences. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow night with more Reddit drama. Take care.